Welcome to the G5 Hive in our next installment of our Worker Bee series, where we deep dive to the G5 college football landscape with the folks that know the teams the best. If you're watching us on YouTube, please hit that like and subscribe button. And if you're listening to us in podcast form, please leave a rate and review. Today, we'll be heading over to the Sun Belt Conference and taking a look at the South Alabama Jaguars, who finished 7-6 a year ago and capped off their season with a victory in the Salute to Veterans Bowl. They wrapped up their 2025 spring practice with their spring game on April 12th. We have a special guest joining us today. He is a sports writer for AL.com. He covers the South Alabama Jaguars. He is a Heisman voter and a one-man on pursuit against unnecessary suffixes in sports. He is Craig Stevenson. Craig can be found at Craig Stevenson on X. Welcome to the show, Craig.
Fellas, thanks for having me. Always good to be with you guys. I hope everything is well in the Hive.
It's alive and well. No suffixes here, so everything is good. Don't have to worry about that. For those who are just tuning into the G5 Hive for the first time, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how long you've been covering South Alabama football?
Sure. I'm from Pascagoula, Mississippi, which is right across the state line from Mobile. I went to the University of Alabama. I've been in sports writing for, counting college, about 30 years, but I have been covering South Alabama since 2015. And, they've only been in existence since 2009. So now that I think about it, it's well over half of their existence. So going into year 11, covering the Jags.
Awesome. Well, let's move over to the Jaguars football team, and they promoted Paul Petrino from wide receivers coach to offensive coordinator. Prior to South Alabama, Petrino was the offensive coordinator at Central Michigan in 2022 and 2023. He was also the head coach from Idaho from 2013 through 2021. What can you tell us about Coach Petrino and the offensive style we can expect to see at South Alabama here in 2025?
Yeah, I don't think it's going to be a whole lot of difference. It's still Major Applewhite's offense. Obviously, he was the offensive coordinator before he became head coach. The one thing that's different is that obviously Paul Petrino quite a bit more experience than Robbie Zell, the former offensive coordinator who went to Wake Forest. So I'm sure there will be, maybe a comfort level, a trust level a little bit higher with Petrino than there might have been before. But it's still Major Applewhite's offense. I don't expect it to be schematically strategically a whole lot different than before. So, they're going to line up in the shotgun most of the time. They're going to do some pistol, 4 wide, 3 wide, 2 tight ends, just kind of depends. But it's going to look very similar, I would expect.
Well, let's get to the position where it all starts on offense, and that's the quarterback. Heading into last year, we were all excited to see Gio Lopez, and Gio Lopez broke out in a big way last season. However, it sounded like he kind of flirted with the portal after the season, but he decided to stay. And then after spring ball, he goes into the portal and lands at North Carolina. Bishop Davenport saw some time when Lopez was dealing with, was it a turf toe? He had some sort of injury, right?
Yeah, turf toe. Yeah, got hurt in the first game and really never really recovered 100%.
And then they also recently brought in Zach Pyron from Georgia Tech. However, he was not there in the spring, and then there's a 26-year-old freshman, Bubba Thompson. Have to mention that because not too often you see a 26-year-old freshman talked about. Yeah. I know you wrote a little piece on him, but first off, were you surprised that Gio went to the portal when he did?
No, not at all. I think it had been brewing for a long time, and I think they, it was a very tenuous situation after the season. They had kind of talked him into staying. But then I think just once, you started seeing things about the House settlement's going to come down, it's going to change things on the power conference level, a lot of money being thrown around. The fact that he left did not surprise me. I don't think it surprised anybody around the South Alabama program. Now, it is obviously a gut punch. Great player, dynamic player with a lot of football left to play in college. The most talented guy certainly that they had at that position. But in terms of being surprised, no, not really.
I assume this now means Bishop Davenport, QB1,
Right.
heading into the season?
Yeah, I would. Yeah, he was 2 the whole spring. He even worked a little bit with the ones kind of here and there. But he was the MVP of the bowl game when Lopez was out, and so he's a guy that can succeed at this level. He's not quite as dynamic as Lopez. He's a good runner, and he is a decent passer. But just in terms of keeping plays alive, extending plays, he's not quite as adept as Lopez. Probably not as hard to tackle for one thing. But I think you can win at this level with Bishop Davenport. He seems solid enough, I would say.
For those not familiar with Davenport, you kind of mentioned, he's not as mobile as Gio was, and being the MVP of the bowl game. Can you describe his style of play?
Yeah, I don't know if I think he's plenty mobile, maybe just not as much of a power runner, I would say, as Lopez, but he can run. I mean, he's got decent speed, decent arm, typical dual threat quarterback, just not quite as dynamic as Lopez. That's what I would say. But again, he's a guy that can be successful at this level. There are players very similar to him that have been.
I guess who's shaping up to be that number 2 in that room?
It's a good question. Pyron, as you mentioned, was not here in the spring, but is a guy with a lot of experience. Started some games at Georgia Tech, went to Minnesota looking to win that job, did not win it in the spring, so he transferred again. He's a guy from the state of Alabama, so obviously has some a guy that they recruited out of high school some. Jared Hollins is kind of a local hero. He was a great high school player at Mary G. Montgomery here in the Mobile area, but just has not been given an opportunity. From what I saw in the spring, was clearly the third guy behind Lopez and Davenport. So I would assume it will be between him and Pyron as the backup. And then Bubba Thompson, you mentioned, guy that was a first-round draft pick in baseball, played 8 years of pro baseball, actually made the major leagues for a while with the Texas Rangers and Cincinnati Reds. Decided to give football a try. But just, it looked like it had been a long time, obviously, and it had been. It was obvious that it had been a long time since he had played football, just in terms of picking things up. Now, he's a great runner. I think if you look at some of the advanced metrics in baseball, he was one of the fastest players in the league when he was playing, and so he can really, really run. But in terms of being a quarterback, I just don't think that's going to happen immediately. He is a true freshman, so even though he's 26 years old, so he has a full 5 to play 4 or whatever it is. But I would expect at some point they will talk to him about maybe trying to contribute at a different position. If it's me, I'm putting him back there and letting him run back kickoffs, if nothing else, because like I said, he is absolutely one of the fastest guys on the team and probably would be one of the fastest guys in the conference.
Plus, 26-year-old, a man playing amongst boys. You could say, like you said, going to a different position could help. And if anybody who's listening is curious, Craig wrote a piece on him around April 11th. Go check that out.
All right, moving over to the Jaguars running game. They lost a sensational freshman in Fluff Bothwell to Mississippi State. Braylon McReynolds goes over to Sunbelt foe Louisiana Monroe. That duo combined for 133 attempts for 949 yards and 14 touchdowns. But this room is highlighted by the return of Kentrell Bullock and his 828 yards and 7 touchdowns from a season ago. They also return guys like P.J. Martin and Iverson Celestine. How did the running back room shape up this spring?
Yeah, even though Bothwell was a really dynamic player, really, had some major highlights on TV, which I'm sure a lot of people saw, I think, especially in the App State game. Bullock was the starter all year. So Bullock is a legitimate, Sun Belt Conference running back. They want to have 2 guys, though. Celestine was a guy that played a little bit at Tulane. I think they kind of envision him as the short yardage guy. P.J. Martin is a guy that has been hurt a lot in his career, but when he has played pretty well. So I think he's got a shot to be the number 2 guy. Keenan Phillips, who is a junior college All-American at Georgia Military, is another guy that's going to come in and have a chance to play. So they're trying to find 2 or 3 out of that group. Bullock certainly is one. The second guy is to be determined there. They have a true freshman coming in, Julian Jordan, out of high school, but I think more of a developmental guy. I think Phillips is going to have a role similar to what McReynolds had, where he's going to be a kick return guy. He's not as big as the other guys. Speed back, maybe third down type guy. But the bulk of the, I would say between the 20s carries or between the 20 and the 10 or whatever it is going to be Bullock and Martin probably. And again, once they get in goal line, you may see some of Celestine. So they're going to have roles for all of them. But, they don't have two proven guys. Well, I mean, even though Bothwell's a freshman, they didn't have 2 1 and 1A like they had last year. But I do think they can put together a solid running group game out of what they have.
Do you think while they try to find kind of that 1B like Bothwell was last year, that equals more carries for Bullock and start the season, or?
Yeah, it could be. That's a good point. I think they like Martin when he has played. He has done well. He had some nice plays in the bowl game as well. But I do think that it's going to be Bullock handling the bulk of it until they get a second guy. But I wouldn't be surprised to see all 4 of them in the early going. They start off with an FCS opponent, Morgan State, so I'm sure you'll see all of them in that game for sure.
Speaking of Morgan State, who do you think gets that first carry? Bullock?
Oh, sure. Yeah, Bullock was in on first down every game last year, so I would say it'll be him.
The wide receiving room graduates 3 of its top 4 receivers from a year ago. That means the Jags will be looking to replace 219 targets, 1,983 yards, and 15 touchdowns here in 2025. This room is highlighted by the return of Devin Vosen, who had 34 catches and 407 yards last season. How did that group look in the spring?
Yeah, it's an experience as you would expect. Other than Vosen, who is a 7th-year senior, he had a traditional red shirt, he had a COVID year, and he had a medical red shirt. He tore up his knee 2 years ago in game 2 of the year, missed the rest of that year. And he did come back and play last year, but you could tell he was a step slow. He was wearing a big, bulky knee brace and just didn't look like he had before. 2022, he was one of their better players. But it's just taken him a while to get all the way back. I do think he's the number 1 receiver for sure. He slimmed down. He said he made a point to try to get in better shape. He lost about 20 pounds. You could tell by looking at him. So he's the number 1 guy for sure. Behind him, you have a lot of numbers. Anthony Eager is a guy who was a redshirt sophomore, track guy in high school, really, really fast, but kind of unpolished as a receiver. We did see him play in the LSU game last year and actually caught a touchdown pass in that game. So I think he's got the inside track to be the number 2 guy. They'll play 3 most of the time. Brendan Jenkins, transfer from Samford, who is the son of Chris Jenkins, the former Falcons wide receiver. I think he's definitely going to be in the mix there. Beyond that, there's some younger guys. Jeremy Scott's a redshirt freshman that they really like. Michael Woods, who's a transfer from Buffalo, didn't play a whole lot last year, but is a senior this year. I think he's got a chance to play some. Noah Toaster is another guy that moved up from Division II and took a red shirt last year. So they've got some numbers there. But I think if you're putting them in order right now, it's Voisin, Eager, then probably Jenkins, Scott, Woods, something like that in that order.
Now, you mentioned Devin slimming down a little bit, and we're another year removed from that ACL injury. Do you feel Devin can recapture his 2022 form here in 2025?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, he's going to have to. I think he's going to be their number 1 guy. And he had a real comfort level with Carter Bradley, the quarterback before, and then with Gio Lopez too. They really looked like in the spring they were going to have a great relationship. And then, of course, Lopez left. And Devin actually considered transferring too, I think a couple of times, but ended up staying. He's kind of become almost the face of the program just because he's been here for so long. I mean, really, he was a freshman in 2019. He played for Steve Campbell. That's how long ago it was, which is 2 head coaches ago. Yeah, I think that, and obviously just being the veteran guy with leadership, he's probably the best interview on the team too. So, they use him a lot in the social media videos and that sort of thing. So he is very much the kind of the face of the program from the player standpoint.
Now, you mentioned your starting lineup with Vosen, Eager, and Jenkins, and then there's probably another mix. How do you see, who do you see best fit in the slot versus the outside?
Voisin is 5'10", 5'11". I don't know. I'm not sure how big he is, but he's not a big guy. He's probably that guy, although last year, they had Colin Lacey, so he actually wound up in the slot a good bit. But, yeah, I would guess probably Boyson working across the middle, and then you got Eager, who's a speed guy, and then Jenkins, who's a bigger receiver, probably on the outside. I would guess that's how they line it up, but they'll move guys around. And I think Boyson's a guy, obviously, who's been here long enough that he knows all the positions, so he could play wherever they need him to. But in terms of the guy that's going to work the the perimeter, or the intermediate routes and over the middle, is probably him.
With the OC change, have you been able to learn anything in terms of how the tight ends might be utilized in this offense?
Again, I think it's going to be very similar. I do think that DJ Thomas Jones last year was very much underutilized, and we saw him sign a free agent contract with the Pittsburgh Steelers, and actually got a significant signing bonus, which you don't often see from undrafted guys. So I think he's got a chance to stick there. They don't have a proven receiver among this group. Trent Thomas, who was a redshirt freshman last year. More of a blocking guy, inline tight end. They'll play two. Of course, they have the H-back, and then they have the inline guy. I think he's probably the inline guy. Rod Gibbs is a junior college transfer last year. Didn't play a whole lot, but I think they like what he has to offer. Breck Long was a junior college All-American last year in Kansas. I think he's one that also is going to have an opportunity to make a mark there, along with Miller McCrumbie, who played at Arkansas State and was a guy that played a good bit at Arkansas State, but wasn't their number one guy. I think all of them will probably have an opportunity, but I would say Rod Gibbs to start off is probably the guy that, if they're looking to throw the ball, the tight end would probably be him.
Now, this offensive line looks to be in pretty good shape heading into the season. They lost right tackle Malachi Carney to Georgia Tech, and right guard Reed Byes graduated. Other than that, the rest of this line returns, and it looks like there's some depth returning too. How did that line look in the spring?
Yeah, I thought the line was kind of a strength. They did lose Carney after spring practice, but I was really kind of surprised, to be honest with you, that he got signed by Georgia Tech, because I didn't think he was very good, and I thought there was a chance he was going to get beat out. He had a lot of penalties last year, I will say that. But, Jordan Davis, who's their 2-year starting left tackle, went into the portal but then decided to come back, which was absolutely huge. I would say, if he had left, you could have probably put him right up there with Gio Lopez in terms of how significant a loss it would have been, because he, great player. I think a guy that could play at the major college level, originally signed with South Carolina out of high school. And, and just, you would have lost both tackles, and obviously, but getting him back is massive. Malachi Preciado, they have two Malachis last year, so it gets kind of confusing. But Preciado, starting center, came in from Purdue and started every game, another rock-solid guy. There are two guards that have started at times, Kenton Gerardo and Asher Hale, who was a true freshman last year. Both got starting experience, although I don't expect both of them to start this year. It looks like Amari Wiggins, the Arkansas transfer, is going to be starting at one of the guards, I think left guard. And then you'll probably have Hale at right guard. Right tackle, now that Carney's gone, it's kind of an up-in-the-air situation. Ethan Hubbard, who transferred in for Duke last year but was hurt most of the year, so he didn't play a whole lot. I think it's got a chance there, along with Adrian Griffin, who is a redshirt sophomore guy they recruited out of high school a couple of years ago. Those are probably your candidates there. And Daniel Foster Allen also is a guy who transferred from Auburn a couple of years ago. He probably has an opportunity as well. But it looks like, I would say, left tackle, left guard, center are pretty well locked in. The other two positions are kind of to be determined in the fall.
All right, if you had to pick an offensive player to have a breakout type season here in 2025, who you got?
I think Anthony Eager is probably the best answer there. Again, he is really being counted on with the numbers that they lost at receiver Colin Lacey. Well, not Colin Lacey, excuse me. Jamal Pritchett graduating. Jeremiah Webb graduating. And Shamar Sandgren all graduated. They were all seniors last year. Those were receivers 2, 3, and 4, or maybe 2, 3-5 or whatever it was. So I think that's probably how it's going to be. Eager, again, he's a local guy, McGill-Tulane Catholic School here in Mobile. Was a track guy in high school, great speed, but has just needs polish as a receiver. And he scored a touchdown against LSU last year. So we've seen that he can do it against high level competition. They need a second guy other than Boyson, and I think it's probably going to be him. He's certainly going to have opportunities. It's kind of up to him to kind of take that and run with it.
Well, let's move over to the defensive side of the ball. And for those not familiar with South Alabama's defense, how would you describe their style and the scheme that Coach Winham runs there?
Yeah, it's a 4-2-5. It's the Kane Womack defense. So if you've seen Alabama play, that's what they play. It's 4-2-5. You have a defensive end, a nose guard, and a defensive tackle playing a 3 technique, and then you have an outside linebacker who will either walk up or will drop into coverage. 2 inside linebackers, and then two corners, 2 safeties, and nickel. Mostly 1 high safety most of the time, and then they'll have the nickel is a guy that they count on to be both a run stopper and a pass defender. So you got to have corner and safety skills there. So again, it's the same defense Womack had. Wyndham was a Womack guy. Was on his staff here. So they lost the head coach and the coordinator last year, and then of course the offense coordinator moved up to head coach, so they really just didn't do a whole lot to change. They just pretty much kept the same scheme, and there may be some tweaks here and there, but it's going to be similar to what they played the last 4 years.
Let's talk a little bit about the defensive line that'll be in that 4-2-5 scheme, and they lost quite a bit. Markevius Thomas, Courtney McBride, Maurice Strong Jr., and Carlos Johnson Jr. all graduated. Akil Washington, Jordan Norman, Jalen Durgan, and R.J. Moss Jr. all left via the portal. This 2025 room is highlighted by the return of Ed Smith IV and Tyler Thomas. That duo combined for 5 sacks in 2024. Given the losses in this room, what are your expectations heading into 2025?
Yeah, it's not really been just a 1-year thing. It's been a 2-year thing because not only did they lose the 3 starters and the 4th guy last year, plus some guys that went to the portal. The previous year they had lost 3 seniors. They were, I think 2023. That's something like 5 6th-year seniors on the defensive line, and now all those guys are gone. So Markevius Thomas, they call him Bubba. He was a 4-year starter at nose. I mean, you don't replace that immediately. I think Ed Smith is the guy that is going to be counted on a lot. Tyler Thomas, which is Trent Thomas's twin brother, and they look identical, by the way. He is probably counted on as that defensive end. You mentioned R.J. Moss. There was I think one of the websites was reporting he was in the portal, but I think that was a mistake. He's still here as far as I know. So he was a very highly recruited player out of high school, but has had some injury issues and has not really been able to get on the field as much. But he definitely has talent. He's the one they're looking at. Beyond that, it's probably going to be a lot of newcomers. They got Steven Johnson out of the portal from McNeese, but he originally signed with Auburn. So I think he's going to have a chance to be either the defensive tackle or the nose with Ed Smith at the other position. Achilles Wood and Nathan Jennings, who are both redshirt freshmen, are going to have a chance to play. And then Emmanuel Waller, who they got out of the portal from UAB at defensive end, I think is going to have a real opportunity. Dominic Wiseman, who is a junior college transfer that was here in the spring, probably will be the 3rd defensive tackle / nose, or maybe the 4th. He'll be in that rotation. Lamondre Brooks is a guy that was really highly recruited out of high school in the Birmingham area, but has just been injured constantly. Another guy that along with Moss, that was really, in terms of when you sign in someone at the G5 level, very highly, rated, but just has not been able to show much of it. But he's going into his last year, so I guess the time now for him.
Well, given all that loss, there's obviously a lot of opportunity. But if you picked one guy, like who you're excited for the most that you could think can take that next step here in 2025, who would that be?
Yeah, Tyler Thomas probably. He was the starter by the end of the year last year at that position. Jordan Norman, who ended up transferring to Tulane, They were Norman was the starter most of the year, but Thomas started to play in the key spots down the stretch. And that's not to say that Norman's not a big loss. He really is, obviously a good player, but I do think that Thomas is the one that is probably going to benefit the most by having more opportunity. But yeah, just based on what I saw in the spring, it's going to be kind of a struggle there. It's been a team strength for 4 or 5 years, and it probably will not be this year. One other thing that did happen with this also happened with the running back position. They lost their position coach last year, and they hired a new position coach, and he was here about 2 weeks, and then he left. And it happened twice. So they've had turnover at that spot too. Not a whole lot of continuity. Ed Smith is pretty much the only one that has played extensively for more than 1 year. And even he has he missed a year earlier with the knee injury, but I think he's probably the leader of that group.
Breaking down this team, I'd say this linebacking group looks like it's going to be the strength of this defense in 2025. They have a duo of Blaine Myrick and Darius McKenzie. They're back to wreak havoc on opposing offenses here in 2025. They combined for 133 tackles last season. Besides Myrick and McKenzie, did anyone else stand out to you in the spring?
Caleb Dozier, redshirt freshman, transferred in from Georgia Tech. He's the guy from the state of Alabama, went to Georgia Tech for a year, didn't play, came back here, and really kind of forced his way into the rotation. I think he's got a real opportunity to be that third inside linebacker. Myrick did not play in the spring; he had a shoulder surgery, but he's going to be back. In the fall, so that gave Dozier a real opportunity, and I think he took advantage of it. McKenzie's another guy that transferred from Maine, so he was taking a real step up in competition. But by the end of the year, was one of their better defensive players, and of course, Myrick is probably a preseason all-conference type player. I think that so they're solid there. Another one to keep an eye on is Dalton Hughes. Started the year, had a stress fracture in his lower back, so he missed about the first 4 or 5 games. Came back, played really well for about 3 weeks, and then blew his knee out. So he actually only got into 3 games last year, but he's and did not participate in the spring. But he's healthy now. I think they like him now that they lost Akil Washington to the portal. I think Hughes has probably got a real shot to be the outside linebacker. I'm trying to think of the
Edge.
Wolf.
Oh,
they call it the Wolf. Yeah, I was just trying to remember the right name, but yeah. So I think that's probably what he is, a guy that can cover and rush the passer, along with some younger guys coming up. Terrell Johnson, who was from Harding, which is a Division II program. He probably will play linebacker and defensive end some. So those are the ones. Parker Shattuck is another one I probably should mention, a younger guy. Played quite a bit, mostly special teams, but some on defense too. I think he's going to have a chance to get on the field quite a bit this year.
Well, the defensive backfield graduated all Sun Belt first teamer and Devin's twin brother, Jaden Vosen. They also lost 3 of their top 4 in terms of snaps played in 2024 to the portal. What are your expectations for that defensive backfield in 2025?
Yeah, I'm going to split them. First of all, I'm going to split them between safety and corner. I'm going to start with safety. I think safety could be okay. Wesley Miller was a starter essentially last year. Didn't start every game, but was a starter by the end of the year. I do think he's going to be a pretty solid player. Mike Harris is another one who has quite a bit of experience. They have some younger guys, Ty Goodwill, Christopher Wallace, that have played quite a bit. Trent Singleton is one that came in from Mississippi State last year and had a chance to start last year, but then got hurt. And so they didn't redshirt him, but they essentially redshirted him. He didn't play a whole lot. Tywan Ray, who is a transfer in from Oklahoma State, I think probably will wind up being a starter at the other safety position. Now that's safety, so I do think they're decent at safety. Corner's going to be a problem though, man. They lost everybody. I mean, they had they lost two and a half starters after the season. Amarian Fortenberry transferred to Kansas State. The nickel, Jordan Scruggs, transferred to West Virginia. They lost Reggie Neely, who was a 12-game starter, ended up going in the portal. I don't know where. I'm not sure he wound up anywhere yet. And then after the spring, Ricky Fletcher, who had started 12 games in 2023 but missed all year last year, came back healthy, looked like he was going to be an all Sun Belt type of guy. Then he went in the portal, went to Ole Miss. Ladarius Webb Jr. went in the portal, and he's gone. He went to, you guys are going to have to help me. I can't remember. It's all running together, man.
Was it Wake Forest?
Wake Forest, you're right. Absolutely. So, they've lost everybody at corner. Javon Henderson, who played at East Tennessee State on the FCS level, came in the spring and got some experience there. D. Darby, who is a true sophomore, was mostly a special teams guy last year. But beyond that, it's all newbies. Cube Gurley is a redshirt freshman, was injured the entire season last year. Nehemiah Chandler, Georgia Tech transfer, will be just getting here in the summer. Deuce Vance, very good high school player in the Hattiesburg, Mississippi area, is coming in or was here in the spring. And then they just got another corner out of the portal, Greg Johnson from Navy. Played a little bit at Navy. So I would say if you had to pick one position that was the biggest liability on the team, probably corner. And obviously with the way teams in the Sun Belt, some of them can throw the ball. That's not ideal. I mean, there are some guys there with talent, but it's all mostly, other than Javon Henderson, who was a starter at the FCS level, it is all completely unproven.
And I was just kind of going through and Webb, between Webb, Scruggs, Fortenberry, Neely, and then if you want to say Dallas Gamble, those combined for a little over 2,500 snaps last season.
Yeah. And I forgot about Dallas Gamble. Yeah, he was the fourth corner last year, and he was a senior, so he's gone. And then the year before that, Ricky Fletcher was a 12-game starter. He missed the entire season. And, it's they hired Jason Washington, who has a reputation as a really, really good coach and recruiter. Has worked at some big-time schools like Texas, worked at Houston for a while, worked at Mississippi State for a while. He's going to earn his money, man, because they are. I mean, it is. There may not be a position group on any school in the Sun Belt that is more of a question mark than cornerback at South Alabama.
Given all that opportunity, is there one guy in particular in that defensive backfield you think can take a next step and really help?
I liked what I saw out of D. Darby in the spring. He's a local guy from Faith Academy in Mobile. He did have some moments in the spring, got on the field quite a bit. Again, they had lost so many guys. And Webb actually didn't do a whole lot in the spring in terms of contact work because he was coming off injury. They tried to protect Ricky Fletcher as much as they could. So if there's one guy, it's probably him. Again, I tend to think that Javon Henderson is probably going to make an impact at some point. Greg Johnson coming in from Navy probably will make an impact at some point, but it's just so hard to tell. Really the only one, literally the only one on the roster that I have seen play in a game for South Alabama is D. Darby, and he was mainly a special teams guy.
Well, Craig, if you had to pick a defensive player to have a breakout type season in 2025, who would that be?
I think I'm going to say Tyler Thomas, the defensive end. Because I think the other guy. I will say this: if Dalton Hughes stays healthy, I think he's one that could certainly have an impact. Was a fantastic special team player, and really, when he got on the field last year, was dynamic for about 2 or 3 games before he got hurt. I would say that guys like Myrick and McKenzie obviously are proven. I don't really think you would count them as breakouts, even Ed Smith to an extent. But yeah, those are the ones I would say. I will say, having watched the spring, really for the last 2 years, but this spring as well, the offense looked so much better than the defense. And, that's unfortunate, but that's what it's going to be. I think they're probably going to have to outscore some people, which is what they had to do at times last year. But, usually, and I know you guys watched a lot of football, when you watch teams scrimmage in the spring or the fall, almost always the defense does well because they know what's coming. They said, well, they line up like this, I know what they're going to run. When South Alabama did it, the offense still was just moving the ball almost at will, which is not a good sign. They started out horribly on defenses last year as well, but by the end of the year, they were okay. And I think that's what's going to have to happen again this year.
Well, moving over to special teams, how did those special teams unit look this spring, and are there any concerns?
There are a lot of concerns. I'm glad you asked. I I think Alexei Polkinen is the kind of entrenched as the punter. He was okay last year. He actually is from Finland. Had not played organized American football really before he came over here. They redshirted him 2 years ago. He actually had some. There was some kind of situation where he had played on a club team in Europe, so they weren't sure he was going to be completely eligible the first year, so they went ahead and redshirted him. And then last year he got on the field quite a bit, and he's the holder as well. Davis Little is a scholarship kicker who they brought in to take over that job after and ended up not winning the job. Lake Marjan ended up having a really good year, and actually he transferred as well to Kansas. And it looked like, Little's the heir apparent, but in the bowl game, I think he missed a short field goal or an extra point early in the game. They ended up putting Hamilton DeBoyan in, who's a walk-on. And they battled through the spring. Little and DeBoyan, it's very much up in the air. I think going into the fall, be the first time in a while they don't have a guy with experience at the Division I level really. Snapper Anthony Zaccaro is pretty solid. They do have some good special teams coverage type guys. I mentioned Keenan Phillips, the running back, earlier. I think they can really count on him in the return game because most of the guys that Bullock ran back some kickoffs, but I think they might try to protect him a little bit. And especially since he's the unquestioned number one running back now. So I would expect Phillips will probably be the impact guy there. Maybe Eager will get some opportunities there just because of his great speed.
Well, now this is where I normally ask you. Now that spring practice is over, which position group do you feel is most concerning? But I think we just got done talking about that with the cornerback position. So I kind of want to dig into that a little bit more. You bring in a new coach to kind of help, coach them up or whatnot. But how do you go about fixing that or figuring it out as the season goes? Is it just getting the reps with people out there to figure out, can you make this jump from, this level of competition, the FCS, to the Sun Belt? Do you see them bringing in transfers this offseason? How do you think they address that cornerback concern?
Yeah, I think it's all of the above. But they have added two transfers. Nehemiah Chandler from Georgia Tech was a guy that just committed a few weeks ago, and then the Greg Johnson from Navy is the other one. So that's two. They may add more. They're probably going to add a couple of more that they have not already gotten commitments from. And obviously, you can only go into the portal up to a certain date, but you can come out of the portal, so to speak, at any time. And so they may add one or two more. But again, it's trial by fire for sure. We saw that to a degree last year, but even last year, they had some guys who had played at this level, even if they had not played a whole lot. Beyond Javon Henderson, who was a starter in FCS, there's just not anybody with any kind of experience. Even the guys that are transferring in didn't play a whole lot. I think Greg Johnson was mostly a special teamer at Navy. Nehemiah Chandler redshirted last year. Georgia Tech did not play at all, as far as I know. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens. They do, again, I mentioned they have an FCS game to start the season. That you get a little bit of a warm up there, but after that, things get kind of tough, obviously, in terms of who they play early in the year. They've got North Texas, which we saw what they could do offensively in the non-conference. They've got Tulane, which is one of the best G5 teams in the country. They play Auburn. So it's might get worse before it gets better, unfortunately.
It's going to be a trial by fire for those corners.
No question.
In today's age of NIL, revenue sharing, and the transfer portal, how has it changed South Alabama's recruiting philosophy?
Yeah, it's hurt. It has really hurt them. They're a young program. It's interesting. The university has only existed since 1963, and the football program has only existed since 2009. So the older alums who have money, the people that are in their 50s and 60s, they went to South Alabama when there was no football, so they kind of grew up as Alabama and Auburn fans, or LSU or Florida State or whatever. So, some of them, the big money people around Mobile, they're writing big checks to Alabama and Auburn. They're not writing them to South Alabama necessarily. So they've really had trouble putting together a viable NIL program but I do think with what we've seen in basketball at South Alabama, and it really helped. They did a good job with it the last 2 years, is the recruiting on the Division II and NAIA level. And that's a little easier to do in basketball where you only have a 14, 15-man roster. And I do think we've seen this year South has gone out and signed a couple of FCS guys, maybe trying to bring those guys up. I mentioned Javon Henderson from East Tennessee State. They added Darius McKenzie coming from Maine. They added a guy named IBK Mafe. It's short for a name that I cannot pronounce. He's actually Boye Mafe's cousin, who I think plays for the Seahawks, from St. Thomas in Minnesota, an offensive lineman from Bethune-Cookman. So I think that may be what they have to try and do, because you're not going to go out and it used to be, 3-4 years ago, you'd get guys that were not playing at Mississippi State and Ole Miss and, Auburn and Alabama to come here. But now those guys are either getting paid to stay or they're getting paid to go somewhere else. DJ Thomas Jones was an Ole Miss transfer. Kentrell Bullock's an Ole Miss transfer. Reed Vise was a Mississippi State transfer. Generally the guys they're getting are either at other G5s where they're not playing a lot, or they're just guys who, maybe went to a power conference school that had a coaching change, or were, figured out they couldn't play at that level or whatever it was. So it has definitely changed things. I'm interested to see what happens with the revenue sharing. I think South Alabama has a plan with that. Obviously, they're not going to have 105 scholarship players and 20 million, to give out to their football roster. But what I have seen, I don't know that they're going to do this in football, but maybe in some of the other sports, they may hold back a couple of scholarships and break them up to use as this can be whatever your, let's say a year scholarship is worth, I don't know, $30,000. Maybe you could break up one of those and give 3 guys $10,000 each. I mean, that sort of thing is going to happen. And again, I'm not sure that happens in football as much, because you need everybody you can get. You need as many bodies as you can get to get through a season. But in basketball, certainly you're going to have a 13 or 14 man roster instead of a 15 man roster, or like we've seen at baseball for so many years, where you get the 11.7 and you give this guy half, and you give this guy a quarter, and you give this guy just books, or whatever it is.
So with the transfer portal and so many, the P4 teams kind of rebuilding their rosters through the portal, are you seeing South Alabama having access to a higher level of high school kids than they used to have in the past?
That's interesting. I thought that Fluff Bato was certainly a D1 guy, or a power conference guy, and obviously he left after he went to Mississippi State, so he was. Gio Lopez was somebody who, certainly can play at that level. But I don't know, in terms of just broad numbers across the board, if that's really happening. I do think that those smaller, high school guys are getting squeezed a little bit. The junior college guys are getting squeezed a little bit. I think that, that may become the new inefficiency again, is that, junior college football really kind of disappeared because guys would go to junior college so they could play. Well, now they can just go in the transfer portal and play. So maybe, schools like South Alabama will start to mine the junior colleges again.
Especially now, if the ruling is going to continue where junior college years don't count against your eligibility.
Yeah, that's a good point. You can play till you're 30.
Yeah, I'm waiting till they go to junior college and they get an agent and say, okay, what's my draft stock here? And okay, now I'm going to go back to college into whatever the BCS or the FBS, I should say, and instead of, or I could just go pro type thing. I'll be interested to see how that goes. But how do you feel that the staff here at South Alabama is doing navigating the portal?
They're doing all they can. I mean, honestly, obviously they've taken a hit. Up until this year, they had held on pretty well. They had not lost any super impact guys. They did lose a few last year. Yam Banks went to Ole Miss and played a little bit. Marquise Robinson left and went to Arkansas. I think some of that was the coaching change, guys that left, because Womack left. This year though, they got hammered, man. They lost, but I think between the December January portal and the April May portal, they lost 11 starters or projected starters. That's massive. And they've of the guys they've added, 2 or 3 of those may be immediate starters. I don't know that as many will be as they would like to. And again, I think part of that is just because they don't have the fun, the money to pay guys to cut to. They can't pay to recruit. Their philosophy has been we will pay to retain, or we can pay to retain. We can't pay to recruit, which obviously is technically against the rules, but what are rules these days? So that's kind of where they're at. I don't think it's my lack of trying or lack of having a plan. It's just, man, you're in the Sun Belt, you're in the G5, you're behind the 8 ball when it comes to all this, and you just do the best you can, and you hope that it was a big deal for them when Devin Boyson and Kentrell Bullock stayed, because there were guys that could have left and had opportunities. I think Bullock especially, but they stayed, and they lose Gio Lopez. There was people thought maybe that Bishop Davenport was going to leave after the bowl game because Gio was kind of entrenched as the starter, and I think it was impressed upon him that, look, if Gio stays, he gets banged up a lot. You're going to have an opportunity if you stay. He ended up staying for the spring, and now Gio's gone and he's the starter. So, you have to have some good fortune in that kind of thing. You have to have players who have that personal loyalty, or they realize that it means more to me to stay here and actually start and get an opportunity to play every week than it is to get paid a little bit and go somewhere where I'm not going to play, sit on the bench.
Well, we've talked about the big concerns for this team, but what do you think the main strength of this team is heading into 2025?
Even with the loss of Gio Lopez, I do think the offense is going to be pretty good. Bullock, Boyson are high-level players at this level. I do think Bishop Davenport is a winning quarterback in the Sun Belt. Not as good as Gio Lopez, but he showed last year when he played, especially late in the year, that he could get the job done. So I think that's probably the offensive line, especially getting Jordan Davis back, is going to be a really good offensive line. So I think we're going to put points on the board. That would be, if I had to pick one facet of the offense, I think the running game. Between Bullock and the younger guys and Davenport, they're going to be able to move the ball on the ground. And Jordan Davis, one of the best left tackles in the conference, I would say.
Okay, what does success look like for the Jaguars in 2025?
Yeah, they've had 3 straight winning seasons. They have had 2 straight bowl games. So, with the talent that they lost, is it realistic to contend for the West Championship, get in the conference championship game? Maybe. Is that the goal? I think that is. I think that is at least to go into the last couple of weeks with the opportunity to be in the championship game, which they did to an extent last year. That win over Louisiana late in the year, obviously, was so big. Probably the biggest conference win they've had here in several years. So I think that that's probably what it is, at least being in contention in November. Again, with what they lost, I don't think you would go into the season considering them among the favorites to win the West. But I do think that, they want to be in contention, be in the, 2-3 in that range. I think that's realistic.
Well, Craig, we've covered a lot of ground today, but is there anything else you want to share or think we should know about this 2025 South Alabama Jaguars football team?
No, I haven't got about. I think my voice is about to go anyway, but I think we covered everything. I appreciate you guys as always. You guys do a good show. You do your homework. I really appreciate that, and looking forward to the season. The Jags play at Auburn this year, which will be their first game against one of the in-state powers. So that's something everybody's really looking forward to. There was, a fear when they started rearranging the SEC schedule that was going to get canceled. But it did. They are playing it. Obviously, it would have been better to catch Auburn maybe 2 years ago or last year even, because I do think they're going to be pretty salty this year. But should be a fun experience, for everybody.
Maybe they can catch him before maybe Jackson Arnold if he happens to win the gig there before they get.
I just know what they have at receiver, and I know what South Alabama has at corner, and like we talked about, so man.
Maybe Cam Coleman has a big game. I don't know. We'll see.
Somebody turns an ankle or something. Yeah.
Well, Craig, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to spend with us and share your knowledge. We greatly appreciate it.
All right, guys. Thanks a lot for having me.
If you're watching us on YouTube, please hit that like and subscribe button. If you're listening in podcast form, please rate and review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Thank you all for your support. And until the next time, we are the G5 Hive.